Everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to discuss on instruments of foreign policy. As you remember, last time we started to talk about understanding foreign policy and diplomacy, one of the elements of international relations that every nation has to follow to achieve its national interest. You subscribe, like, share, and comment this video and help Sanya Academy. So today, we are going to talk about instruments of foreign policy. Foreign policy, as we have just seen in the previous sessions, or one of the lessons, is that the objective or the goal that the nation or country need to attain or aspire to attain by devising policy that could be implemented using different instruments in it is international interaction with other states in the international system. So this foreign policy needs instrument tools to be implemented and achieve or bring the outcome for the nation to gain its national interest. So there are different types of instrument that we look at by dividing into two sections. So one of the instruments of foreign policy is diplomacy. You know, diplomacy is a peaceful process by which actors in the international system conduct their interaction or discussion or negotiation using different tools that are just incorporated in diplomacy. So, what is the term diplomacy by itself? Just to get the full understanding of this instrument, we need to define it from beginning. So, diplomacy, as you can see from this slide, is a process between actors exist within a system that means international relations and engage in private and public dialogue, or that is to mean diplomacy by itself, to pursue the objective in a peaceful manner. So it is a process of discussion, negotiation that has a peaceful nature that agents or actors representing the state perform their negotiation using tools that are just incorporated in this diplomacy so as to achieve the countries or their nations' national interest. Or some also say diplomacy is a part of foreign policy. Uh, it says foreign policy has two key ingredients, as we may refer from this slide: the action of the state and strategy that the state take to achieve that goals or national interests, basically. So foreign policy has two key ingredient: action that the actors do and the strategy they pursue to achieve the goals that are set in that foreign policy. So from this perspective, we can understand that foreign policy is an essential tool to required to operate successfully in today's international system. So as you can understand from its very nature, this international system is incorporated or just comprised of different states pursuing different interests using different tools, but there is an initiation and motivation by this state to use peaceful way of negotiation to resolve international issues that may affect different nations from different corner of the world. So it is seen as very important and essential tool that is required to achieve successfully the international issues and also maintain peaceful international interaction. So the goal of this diplomacy is basically to influence the behavior of others in favor of one's own interest. Those nations undertaking diplomacy basically focus on how to influence the behavior of other states to achieve what they want in their interaction or in their international relation. So this is one of the facts that we need to understand, to know more about diplomacy. This diplomacy by itself has different facets or different uh, types or kinds. There are different kinds of diplomacy. There are multilateral diplomacy, public diplomacy, leader to leader diplomacy, or what we call symmetry diplomacy, secret diplomacy, bilateral diplomacy, shuttle diplomacy. There are many of them. So it can take different forms to be practiced. So these are the forms through which diplomacy could take place or could um, be undertaken by actors that are representing the interests of the state. So this entails that or indicate that the nature or essence of diplomacy is bargaining. When we say bargaining, it is negotiation. So bargaining is the means of settling differences over priorities between contestants through the exchange of proposals for mutually acceptable solutions. It is a process of just providing mutually significant and important solution to common problem they face. In terms of a conflict, for example, regarding border conflict, two nations which are in responsibility or responsible for that conflict come together to address that problem by bringing or exchanging proposals. This is aimed to reduce or just resolve the problem that is already occurred uh, in this state or between this state. Diplomatic bargaining is used primarily to reach agreements, compromises, and settlements where government objectives conflict. So, the purpose of this diplomatic bargaining is to bring settlement or to uh, address the issue. This could be done by reaching on agreement or leaving avenues for compromises or settlement of the problem or the conflict that once occurred between government. So this is a way peacefully problems are resolved, and which is most of the time is said to be very peaceful in this nature. So here, as we may know, international politics is comprised of two main actors, as we have just already said. Our international relation basically is composed of two main actors, which are state actors and non-state actors. So these two actors in the modern or contemporary world are said to be very effective in this practice. So they are very important actors of diplomacy. They are very important implementers of diplomacy. So this is what diplomacy is in the bad eye view, or simply having this simple and precise understanding of diplomacy could help us how this diplomacy is used to implement foreign policy or put foreign policy into action. So if diplomacy this and states employ this diplomacy to achieve their interests, then what are the rules of effective diplomacy? This is a question that we need to answer by depending on certain standards that I just mentioned here. So what are the rules of effective diplomacy? What rules should diplomacy follow to be effective or to achieve the desired goal or objective that was just mentioned in the foreign policy? The first thing is those actors and agents who are there or in charge of taking this or conducting this diplomacy should be realistic. When we say those actors should be realistic, it is to mean that they have to have a goal that matches their ability to achieve them. Nations should not negotiate beyond their capacity, beyond their ability to achieve, because the nature of power between negotiating parties or countries is different from country to country. So this different entails or indicate that the power of the state matters in achieving the goal of diplomacy or foreign policy. So a nation should know how much the capacity that it has, economic, political, or diplomatic capacity, determines the goal that was set by that. The second one is the person or the agent who is responsible of undertaking this diplomatic negotiation has to be careful about what he say or what they say. That means a nation should have experienced diplomats who plans out and wastes waters carefully because waters are more dangerous if they are not properly handled in the negotiation process. So this should be clearly weighed. Experienced diplomat should handle the case. Inexperienced individuals should not be access to this kind of talks because it has a problem in its outcome. The third one is seek common ground. That means the beginning of every negotiation is dispute. Conflict is the beginning of negotiation. That means if conflict exists, there's a need for negotiation, the need for just finding common solution to the problem that was just already occurred. So here we need to understand that, or diplomats need to understand that it is important to maintain certain degree of flexibility. There should be flexibility, understanding the significance of common problem they're dealing with, and then being flexible and also talk on how to address that issue is very important. So seeking common ground is very interesting. You should not um, strive to achieve your interests at the expense of other countries or other governments um, need. So this is the third rule. The fourth one is you need to understand the other side. That means you have to also appreciate the opponent's perspective, even though you don't agree with that. Even though the point they raise or the issues they talk is not appropriate to you, then you have to appreciate it. And also, you have to know the power of their decision making and how much their diplomats or ambassadors are engaging in that discussion and how much they are influential, how much they are strong in the way they talk or the way they deal with the issue. So this should be clearly understood. And the fifth principle or rule of effective diplomacy is be patient. That means the person who is in charge of taking this issue to the table on the behalf of the state should bide itself or himself or herself by the time. That means um they should be, or those agents should be wise and also should be understand how much the other side is strong. They should be cautious in leading those concessions or agreement because if they are not patient, their action could have some impact on the national interests of the country. So this should be understood in that way. And the sixth principle is leaving avenues for retreat open. That means you have to make sure that there is also room for retreat or for taking off or just getting out of the negotiation because nations or countries may call it for honor, saving face, or prestige. Sometimes you have to understand that you have to leave if the agreement terms that were set by your opponent is affecting the interest of your country or your nation. So you have to consider that you don't have to give up the interest of your country. So you have to leave if that seems destructive to the objective of the country. States make use of what are known to be card and take approach such as threat, punishment, and promise or rewards in dealing with the foreign policy approach. So these are also another strategies they use to achieve their national interest. When we say threat and punishment, they represent stick approach. Threat is the hypothetical action that indicates and signifies the possibility or probability of punishment, whereas punishment is the real one. Threat involves some hypothetical action. It's kind of uh, dictating to the nation that some sort of consequence is going to happen if that state do not accept the proposal that was set by the powerful state. Punishment, whereas, is action, the real one. This one is the hypothetical one, not real, but presumed to be happen in the future. But this one is real one. The other two are tactics that are promise and reward represent the carrot approach. Punishment and threat, they represent stick approach, and the carrot approach is represented by promise and reward. These are also involve hypothetical and real action, where promise is hypothetical, then reward is real action. So this is similar to what we call threat and punishment in that aspect. Promise is a hypothetical action which aims at influencing the behavior of the state based on the future help of giving something. So this is what they say. Reward, on the other hand, is the promise that was put to action, or the promise that was just put to real one. So it is when the state A gives reward to state B in advance or based on the promise that is done on the past. So this is what reward is by that. So we need to understand that reward is a real action, whereas promise is hypothetical one or action. Generally, today we have seen the first part of resume of foreign policy implementation, basically diplomacy, which is an important and peaceful way of just implementing foreign policy without using force. Here we have seen that diplomacy is the act of negotiation to address collective or common problem that was caused between the state or parties. In this case, those parties or entities acting on the behalf of state or maybe organization should take into account six rules that are determinant factor for the effectiveness of diplomacy. And also in that diplomacy, we have seen that there is a possibility or strategy of stick and the carrot strategy that is used by the state to achieve this foreign policy objective. This stick represents punishment and threat, and also the carrot represents promise and reward. So this is all for today. Do not forget to subscribe. Thank you very much for your attention. Until next time, have a nice time.